Welcome back. Before the coffee break, we had the opportunity to listen to Matthias Peichel, who taught us more about how greenhouse gas fluxes can be measured across the landscape. Now it's time to go into forest economics, and I would like to warmly welcome Professor Francisco Aguilar.
To be a researcher is a life of learning. Every day there's something new to be studied. And one has the great privilege of being able to share that knowledge with other people, whether it's in the classroom or outside the classroom. That combination of knowledge that is applied, that can make a difference, and contributing to that state of understanding, pushing the boundaries of what we know, I think is a big reason for why I decided to become an academic. I am Francisco Aguilar. I am a professor in the Department of Forest Economics. In the context of forests, I like to study how to quantify what we value, this abstract concept of what we like, what's important to us, and why we value it. Whether it's a wood product, whether it's forest land, or the services that we get from forests, like clean water, that interconnection between why we value, how we value it, and the impact that our actions have on those resources is a central focus of my research. As a professor, the biggest drive and motivation is that of the next question. What comes after the current question, and you have come up with answers and possible answers to that. What is the next question? What's the next answer? I think that drive and quest for knowledge is a big motivation for what I do. In the long term, I hope to make a positive change in the lives of people, in the conditions of the forest resource, nationally and globally. And that's a big aspiration with my research program.
Welcome.
Thank you, Melanie.
Well, you're interested in how to quantify what people value in the context of forests. Can you tell us something about how your research is performed?
Yeah, so in perhaps to frame forest economics first, it's about both sides. So we go all the way from the forest, the landowner, the supply chain, but also the consumer. So along that really complex web, we look at survey data. So we survey forest owners, we survey consumers, we look at market data. Much of the work that I do in Geneva, for instance, with the UN involves market and trading. Some of the work that I do with my colleagues here at SLU, it's about surveying forest owners and what they see, what they perceive, what they value. So it's using both data from the markets, but also data that we frame within our own experiments.
What would you say is the impact of your research on society? With this kind of research, how can society make use of it?
My parents are in the audience, by the way, and they're doctors. I'm a little nervous. At times I see it as what we do is an X-ray in economics. We can come in and perhaps find a small fracture, a small problem, and we offer that as information to the policymakers so they can take that information and find the right solutions to take for society. So a lot of this is information, providing information, especially for the side that we don't see. There are sites in the market that we see, but there are many sites in the market that we don't. And I think that's where research comes in, especially in forest economics.
Yeah. I think you'll tell us more about the different sides soon. Well, you have worked in different countries. Could you tell us something about what Sweden and SLU could offer you as a researcher? What's interesting about Sweden?
I can go in so many different ways. But I would say I start with SLU. We often think about our contributions to sustainable development, and sustainability is a global concept. So we're anchored in Sweden as SLU, but our footprint is global. And I think that's what attracted me to come to SLU when I moved to from the States was continuing to make that global impact anchored in a country where that global impact is valued. And as a Swedish society, we value that. I think we're at the forefront of action, of interest, of driving change. And I think not just the university, but the context of society is just a perfect framework for me.
That's good to hear. Well, I would like you to take the stage to deliver your lecture.
Absolutely.
So please.
Thank you, Molly.
And I have the pleasure of introducing Francisco Aguilar, professor of forest economics, talking about forest economics, a lagom response to sustainability aspirations.
Thank you, Molly. If you hear the question, how many sides are there to a coin? How many sides do you think there are? Most people think two, right? Heads and tails. And today I will use that analogy of a coin, the two sides, to bring forward just 3 ideas that I want to share with you today. For every heads that we see, there's always a tails. Maybe we don't see it, maybe we see it, but they will always be there. There is always another side. Two sides, but the coin really has a third side too, the edge. It brings them together. One cannot be with the other. They come together as one. And that's my third point, is one coin. It doesn't matter how many sides we see or we want to see or we prefer or like. It's one single coin. And in the discussion of sustainability, that's exactly what we need to approach. Just look at all the sides and embracing them. About 2 weeks ago, my family and I took a short trip to London. We went to the Houses of Parliament. We even found time to go to Stonehenge. Fantastic trip. And as I was getting ready for the trip, I'm a planner, I was looking for things. And in the back of a drawer that we brought from the US, I found a coin. 2 sterling pound coin for my trip to London with the family. I told the news to my wife. She was very happy. We can have a little money for a souvenir for the kids. I took a deep breath, took the coin, and put it back in the drawer. Why did I do that? Because on the one side of the coin, there was the face of the late Queen Elizabeth II. I lived in England at a time when she was a constant. So for me, the value of that coin, it wasn't just the 2 pound face value of the coin, but it's the worth of the coin to me. And that's in economics what we look. I mean, we don't only look at the market value, the face value of the coin, but we look at the whole value of it. And at times in the Swedish language, it's good to make the distinction between finance and economics. In economics, we look at all the sides of the coin. In finance, it's only the market value of the coin. And it's good to make that distinction. Moving on to the coin forest. At times in our society, I feel like we are in a very, at times, bitter debate about conservation and management. It has 2 different sides. But yet, when I talk with my colleagues, when I see and I see what is happening in the country, I feel like we are really embracing both. Think about set-asides. When we have a single management unit, within the same management unit, one area is set aside for other purposes beyond active management. So within the same unit, we are actively engaging in conservation, we're actively engaging in management. 2 sides of a coin in the very same area. So, and I believe that, as you will see from hear from my other colleagues today, I truly believe that science and technology will make that trade-off between the 2 sides a lot smoother, and probably a smoother edge too. I don't think we'll necessarily need to pick one side or the other. Sweden, and one of the beauties of being in this country, we can enjoy our lands. We can roam around. We can go berry picking. It's something that's allemansrätten, every person's public right. Huh? Common in the Nordics, but not uniform. So I learned, for instance, that in Norway, cloudberries. If you want to pick cloudberries in Norway, just beware. In some areas of Norway, you have to ask permission from the landowner. So not necessarily the case here in Sweden, but not uniform. Public right access is not necessarily uniform. And definitely is the exception to the rule in most parts of the world. In most parts of the world, one can really only enjoy public access in publicly owned land. So it's really a wonderful benefit that we enjoy in this country. 2 sides of the coin. We enjoy the benefits, but who bears the cost of public access? I'll get to this question in a moment. I'll just circle back to it. Just as we enjoy our forests for blueberry picking, a wonderful walk down the river, our forests in our country, I strongly believe they built a wooden bridge to the rest of the world. So if we look at the recent statistics when it comes to harvesting of wood products and management, production of wood products, if you think about 5 units as 5 cubic meters of wood, for every cubic meter of wood that we consume locally and domestically, about 4 of them go to the rest of the world. Europe, the Americas, Asia, and Africa. 1 to 4. So I really believe when we export, when we trade those products, we are sharing our values. Ingrained in those products are legal expectations, fair labor conditions, fair income, environmental rules. Ingrained in that wood. So it's very important to do that, because as a country, as Molly was asking me about why I moved here, is because we are stepping up to the challenge of sustainability. We're telling the world that we can do this. And there's challenges, absolutely, but we are ready to face that challenge. We're ready to share the goods of it. Products, non-products, access, different sides of the coin. We have high expectations, and at times, in recent policy debate, I have been hearing about an expectation to raise the bar a bit more. Very well intended. For instance, increasing the expectations for traceability and also accountability. Impacts of the forest, water, carbon, traceability, we can trace back the product back to the origin. And very well intended, but something that is very good to keep in mind is that any additional regulations to a system that's already regulated, to a system where, in my opinion, we enjoy not just necessarily the freedom of responsibility, but regulated freedom and responsibility. In a fairly regulated system, adding more expectations, more regulations can increase the cost substantially and can have unintended consequences. Forest certification is an example. In forest certification, and based on my own research, people would like to value the very fact that we know that a product is coming from a well-managed forest, and we can trace it back. But my research shows me that although people value that, they're not necessarily willing to pay for it. And that's a challenge. Because then it's the forest owner, it's the people along the value chain that are internalizing all those costs, but the market wasn't paying for it. Again, and the reason I bring this up is because as we see a new flurry of expectations and regulations, that can put greater pressure on those individuals. And if we increase cost and we reduce supply from products from our forests that are well managed, they'll have consequences from those parts of the wood products that we share with the rest of the world too. If we can no longer share that with the world, who will share that with the world? Will that be as sustainable as the wood that comes from Sweden? Will it have the same expectations of social rights, environmental responsibility? I don't know. But it's definitely a challenge that we face if our products cannot do that. So, remember the coin I left in the drawer? Still there, by the way. We went to the Houses of Parliament, and at the end we went to the shop. We found it was worth £2, a little souvenir that my kids found. Wonderful. But who should pay for it? Who should pay for that souvenir? Should I pay for it? Should my wife pay for it? I paid for it. Because I made the choice to leave the coin back. That showed me in life that the decision that I took to save that coin and leave it behind had a price to me. And I had to step up to the challenge. About 27 kroner. Absolutely worth it. I got the benefit of storing an icon that has so much value to me at very little price of 27 kroner. Absolutely worth it. The beauty of markets. It's the beauty of markets. And I go back in this full circle back to where I started, because in this two-sided debate, we have to remember that third side. And I see it as compensation. If we expect more from our forest, which is again very laudable, but who is going to pay for them? Who's going to pay for those regulations? for forest owners, if there is an expectation that now we have to set more land aside or protect some habitats, what many people want to do, absolutely want to do, but even that has a cost. And who is willing to take the other side of the coin and pay for it? So compensation, that third side. And just to wrap things up, and sort of a take-home message in policymaking and planning, if we look at a forest as a landscape, heads, coins, edges, a system that is diverse, is a system that's more resilient, a system that we can heads and tails and decompensates one another, a system that is lagom, not too little, not too much. Too much of anything is too little of something else. And that's my take-home message. A diverse landscape, a diverse forest with heads and tails is a forest that will be there and will be in a better position to deal with the unknowns that the future will bring. We really don't know what the future will bring. But a diverse forest that's resilient, that's diverse, will be able to put us in a good position to cope with those unknowns. With that, I thank you very much for your attention. That was me, Francisco Aguilar. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you. Well, I have a question about forest certification.
Yeah.
Your research indicates that forest certification is valued by consumers, but market premiums for certified wood have not come to reality as it was. Well, that was the plan, I think. As a result, a financial burden has been passed on to Swedish forest owners and industry. Could you elaborate a little more about the factors behind this?
So, forest certification has become a cost of doing business. It's a societal expectation, which is, again, is very good. But markets have, set a price that's very international, very global. Certification places a transaction cost to be able to meet that. And I think one of the reasons why Sweden is one of the leaders in that process is the very fact that we have very good systems, paperwork, tracing, integration of the forest industry. So it has been able to meet that expectation at a relatively lower cost than other parts of the world. But why? Again, people want to see that, but they were not willing to pay for it. And people are the building blocks to the market, every little building blocks. So we have niches, small niches where people might be willing to do that. But in a global commercial market, that just hasn't materialized.
And you're welcome with your questions as well.
Yeah.
We have one over there, Helena. Just coming back to the question I just asked, what could possibly reverse the situation so that forest owners get paid for their sustainable management efforts? Compensation, you said.
Yeah, compensation. The two sides of the coin, right?
Yeah.
We as a society want something. Let's say we identify some key species that we want to conserve. Very, very laudable. Perhaps they're in private ownership. What would you say, Malin, if I come to your house and there's an old cabinet in your house and I said, that's so precious. I mean, that really should belong to everyone. And next time, if you sell your house next time and you move, you cannot move that. That's going to stay behind and it's going to be with the house. Now, that doesn't sound too fair. So compensation is critical. And I haven't said paying. I have said compensation. Because compensation can come in many forms. So it could be payment. It could be some kind of tax reduction. It could be some kind of preferential accounting. So that's sort of a next step, how to compensate. I think that's very critical.
But that's up to the policymakers, the doctors.
Absolutely, that's for the doctors.
Yeah.
So for me, it's but I mean, we can show the doctors what options we can take. But it's a social, political process, of course, as you know.
Of course, yeah. Thank you. We have a question over there. On the first row.
Thank you, Francisco, for a very intriguing talk. This has so many dimensions, and in the real world, outside research, people want to optimize everything, biodiversity and production from the forest. And it's so, how do you get this research that it's lagom, these compromises, though it is those we need. Politicians need to take into that, and different forest owners and biologists and everyone else have to take that into account. So how do you get there with your research so that people take it and do it?
Yeah. So I can give you an academic response, and then I'll go back to my Swedish response. So, but the academic response will be, first of all, we expect people to be rational, but really we're rational with very imperfect information. So, the issue of optimization is, at times I feel like it's very deterministic, that this is the optimal point, and there's a lot of uncertainty in that. So log-om also allows you for that buffer zone of coping with the unknown. I would say that's the first part of, I guess, of my answer to your question, Pernilla. Then I'll go. I think, in fact, Malin sitting next to me, communications is so critical because the two sides have to talk. I think part of the challenge is that the two sides are not talking to one another or not listening to one another. So maybe that's not an economic answer, but that is my personal view. And my Swedish answer: go have fika. Really,
in the forest,
really, go into the forest and have fika and bring the two sides together. Because I think it can make a big difference. Not a very academic answer in that sense, but my true answer, my honest answer, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Fika in the forest, it's outstanding. Well, another topic maybe. Well, a forest owner who possesses a woodland property with rich biodiversity doesn't have to, but might perceive the biological values as a financial burden, as it could limit the logging opportunities quite a lot. So how would you, as a forest economist, view the fact that high biodiversity values are unevenly distributed among different landowners? There are, for example, very, very high biological values on many properties in the northwestern part of Sweden.
First, I go back to my talk. Recall the value of my coin, it was 27 kroner, and I kept the £2 coin, which is worth a lot more to me. If we compensate forest owners for the market value where the biodiversity is less expensive than the actual biodiversity value of it. That's the beauty of trade. Now, how to make that mechanism work, that's a different question. But I think that is part of internalizing the benefits. In economics, economists are really happy that now we're talking about externalities, the things that the market doesn't capture. But I think my other side of the coin is we should talk about the internalization of those externalities, internalizing the benefits of biodiversity into the benefit of the forest owner. Some compensation would be good.
Yeah. Well, it's also a golden question, I think, in a way. A researcher told us about the golden questions.
A question with many sides.
Yeah, many sides. Any more questions in the audience? Yes, we have one.
Thank you so much for a very interesting and inspiring lecture. What you put up here was related, of course, to the forest. What we see, for instance, regarding our food production, it's actually the same problem. People are not willing to pay for our animal welfare, for instance, or our organic productions and so. How do you see the future? Because it has a lot to do. Maybe it's a consumer problem. With the geopolitical situation that we have seen that the willingness to buy organic food, for instance, has declined. Maybe it will be even worse also for the forest. How do we actually try and change that trend?
Thank you for the question. I would say that one of the reasons why many people don't pay is because they cannot pay. I mean, when it comes to income. So a very quick deviation to answer. Well, when you talk about taxing carbon emissions, one of the concerns that we have about that is that we can place a great burden of taxation on people of lower income. It's a little bit what we call regressive kind of taxation. It could become that. So some kind of financial incentive or disincentive, penalizing the non-organic, could be one option. The other side of the coin is that will make food more expensive? How can people afford that? But before we get into, coming from a forest economist, before we get into money interventions, I think information has a great power. Informing people why perhaps you should be choosing one food over another. What are the benefits, not just for us as consumer, but the benefit to the environment, the well-being to the animals? Next time, if that's raised awareness, information, it's a very powerful tool that we can use to engage and change behavior. So taxation, financial compensation, interventions, they definitely work. But information, awareness, it's a very powerful one we cannot forget.
So what do you think policymakers could learn from the Lagom response to sustainability aspirations that you suggested in your lecture?
I'm not very good at telling people what they should learn from what I say. I don't really like that. But for policymakers, I would say talk to the different sides and just beware of the hidden costs. Aspiring for things like we might be very dear to us, increasing welfare, recognizing, labeling that welfare, that comes at a cost. And if we make production too expensive, if we make the regulatory environment too expensive, somebody else will step in. And will that somebody else be as good as we are?
Do you think we pay too little attention to the hidden costs today, or the policymakers? Is it?
That is probably my impression.
Probably your impression, yeah.
I would say so. Yeah.
Do you have more questions here? No, I don't think I have any email question right now either. So, what would be one of your dream projects as a forest economist? Do you have any?
I have a hat full of dreams.
Okay, tell us. One
but
or
I
two
will
of
give
them.
you two.
Yeah, why not?
The first dream will be to go back throughout my career and look at everything that I did and look in retrospectively what I wish I would have done differently. That's my one side of the dream. The other side of the dream is the future. And, like often we use surveys to ask people, are you concerned about the climate? What do you think about this product? How often you use your phone and use face recognition or use your thumb to recognize that it's you? I think technology, science will be able to, in the future, give us a lot better sense of what people perceive, believe, fear, value in more nuanced ways than just a number in a survey. I think technology will do that in the future, and that's one of my dreams. Get to see what people really see value, perhaps without the frame of a number, but something that science can sense and tell us about your fear, your aspirations.
I think you could talk to Helena Nord that started this, the first session.
Yeah.
She talked about eye movement. She uses pictures and eye movements and to discover what people.
Yeah, doing it with
value.
people. Yeah, it's.
Well.
A dream is a dream.
A dream is a dream. Thank you very much, Francisco.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you. Have a short break until 11:20, and then we will meet Malin Elfstrand. So welcome back then.